The silence was deafening. Captain Marcus Reed had experienced combat in 3 different star systems, survived a black hole encounter, and negotiated peace between warring alien species. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the moment when every human communication channel across the galaxy went dark at exactly 0300 hours, Galactic Standard Time. The quantum communication array aboard the massive Starship Liberty flickered once, then displayed the message that would change everything. Admiral Kate Morrison's voice cut through the bridge like a knife through the vacuum of space itself. All human vessels, this is Admiral Kate Morrison. Execute Protocol Omega immediately. Return to Sol System. All diplomatic missions are terminated. All trade agreements are void. Humanity withdraws from galactic civilization. Marcus felt the temperature drop 10 degrees, or maybe that was just his blood turning to ice. Protocol Omega, the nuclear option. The one contingency plan they'd all hoped would remain buried in classified files until the heat death of the universe. His hands trembled as he reached for the command console, muscle memory taking over while his mind struggled to process what he'd just heard around him. The bridge crew stood frozen like statues in a museum exhibit titled "The Moment Everything Changed." The soft hum of the ship's engines seemed to grow louder in the oppressive silence. Lieutenant Jake Palmer, barely 25 with that eager academy gleam still in his eyes, was the first to break the spell.
"Oh,
Sir, that can't be right. We've been the backbone of galactic peace for 3 centuries. Poor kid," Marcus remembered. Being that optimistic once, back when he believed the universe was fundamentally fair and that good intentions mattered more than politics. That was before he'd watched the Galactic Council vote down every human proposal for the past 5 years. Before he'd seen alien species take humanity's generosity and spit in their faces. But Marcus knew this was real. Across the galaxy, from the mining colonies in the Outer Rim to the diplomatic stations, orbiting alien homeworlds, every human ship, every human colony, every human diplomat was receiving the same message. The greatest civilization in galactic history was packing up and going home, and they weren't asking for permission. Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you saw someone with real power just ... walk away? Doesn't happen often, does it? And when it does, shakes the very foundations of everything people thought they knew. The Liberty-esque communication officer, Commander Sarah Walsh, looked up from her console with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm getting similar transmissions from every human vessel in the sector. The Enterprise, the Defiant, the Prometheus, they're all receiving the same orders." Marcus nodded grimly. Of course they were. This wasn't some rogue operation or miscommunication. This was coordinated, planned, and executed with the precision that had made humanity legendary across 47 star systems. Meanwhile, 300 light-years away on the Galactic Council Station, orbiting Centauri Prime, Ambassador Alina Cross was delivering humanity's final statement to the assembled alien delegates. The woman who had spent 15 years of her life trying to build bridges between species, who had missed her daughter's wedding to negotiate a peace treaty, who had truly believed that cooperation was possible. Alina stood at the podium in the Great Council Chamber, looking out at the sea of alien faces that had become as familiar to her as her own family. The Thessians with their crystalline features that sparkled when they were excited. The Corvan delegates with their multiple arms always gesturing emphatically. The Andromedans who considered themselves the intellectual superiors of everyone else in the room. Her voice was steady. But anyone who knew Alina Cross really knew Herc, could see the fury burning behind her eyes like a star about to go supernova. For 200 years, we've mediated your wars, built your trade routes, and shared our technology. We've been your shield against chaos and your bridge between worlds. The chamber was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop in the vacuum of space. These beings had grown accustomed to human reliability, human innovation, human sacrifice. They'd taken it all for granted, the way you take for granted that the sun will rise tomorrow. But when we asked for help protecting the innocent on Kepler 7, you voted us down. When pirates destroyed our colony ship Freedom with 8,000 souls aboard, you offered empty condolences and moved on to the next agenda item. When we warned you about the ecological disaster brewing on Tau Ceti, you called us naive and approved the colonization anyway. Elena's voice rose slightly, just enough to send a shiver through the assembled delegates. Here's the thing about humans that the galaxy had forgotten. We don't just get mad, we get even. And we're very, very good at it. The chamber erupted in alien voices clicking. Whistling, buzzing sounds that the universal translators struggled to process. Panic, confusion, disbelief. How could their reliable humans just leave? But Alina raised her hand for silence, and the room obeyed. Even now, even in this moment of ultimate rejection, they still responded to human authority. The irony wasn't lost on her. We're done. Humanity withdraws from galactic affairs. Don't follow us. Those 5 words, "don't follow us," carried the weight of 3 centuries of human military might, human technological superiority, and human diplomatic influence. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. As Alina walked out of the chamber the last time, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence, she didn't look back. Behind her, the greatest political institution in galactic history was realizing that they'd just lost the one species that had kept their entire civilization from collapsing into chaos. The Galactic Council had made the classic mistake of believing that indispensable people were also replaceable. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. And this is where it gets really interesting. The humans didn't leave in anger. They left in disappointment. And that, my friends, is infinitely more dangerous. Ready to see what happens when the galaxy's most powerful civilization simply says, enough? Because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about power, loyalty, and the price of taking good people for granted. Just like the power of compounding interest can turn small, consistent investments into massive wealth over time. The consequences of humanity's withdrawal are about to compound in ways the galaxy never imagined possible. 3 weeks, that's all. It took for the greatest galactic civilization in history to start crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. 3 weeks for the galaxy to learn the hard way that you don't realize how much you depend on someone until they're gone. The first sign of trouble came from the Outer Rim trade routes. Captain David Mitchell of the independent freighter Stardust was hauling rare minerals from the Kepler mining stations when his navigation system simply died. One moment he was cruising through hyperspace. The next he was staring at a blank screen and drifting in the void between stars. Control, this is Stardust. My nav system just went dark. What's my position? Silence. The hyperspace beacon network, that invisible web of quantum transmitters that had guided ships safely through the galaxy for over 2 centuries, was failing. Without regular updates from Earth, beacons were shutting down one by one, like dominoes falling in slow motion. David wasn't alone. Across the galaxy, thousands of ships found themselves lost in space, their sophisticated navigation systems reduced to expensive paperweights. The stellar cartography that every vessel relied on is designed by human mathematicians. The quantum positioning algorithms, human-programmed, fail-safe protocols that prevented ships from flying into black holes. You guessed it, human engineering. Ever tried to navigate without GPS? Now imagine doing it in 3-dimensional space with no landmarks and deadly radiation fields that can fry your ship in seconds. That's what the galaxy was facing. But wait, it gets worse. Much worse. Chancellor Vex of the Decian Republic called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The great chamber that usually hosted delegates from 67 different species was half empty. Only 32 representatives showed up. The rest were dealing with crises at home that made galactic politics seem like a luxury they couldn't afford. The Chancellor's crystalline features, normally a brilliant blue when he was confident, had faded to a sickly gray. His voice cracked as he addressed the assembled delegates. We are experiencing what can only be described as a cascade failure of galactic infrastructure. Trade routes are collapsing. Communication networks are failing. Our economy is in free fall. In the back of the chamber, Dr. Rebecca Hayes watched the proceedings with a mixture of sadness and bitter vindication. She was the last human xenobiologist still speaking to alien governments, having stayed behind to help with the transition. Against direct orders from Earth, her career was over, her citizenship revoked, but her conscience was clear. The humans were more integrated into our society than we realized, she admitted to the council, her voice carrying the weight of a woman who'd seen the future and didn't like what she saw. Every major system, every trade route, every peace treaty, we had our fingerprints on all of it. Think about that for a moment. When you're building something, a business, a relationship, civilization, you don't always notice how much of the foundation depends on one crucial element until it's gone. The Corvin Mining Consortium was the first to feel the real impact. Their CEO, a six-armed being named Coral, stood before the council with what humans would recognize as panic in his multiple eyes. "Our entire shipping fleet is grounded," he announced. Every transport vessel was either human-operated or used human-designed engines. Without their maintenance protocols, our ships are breaking down faster than we can repair them. The irony was delicious, wasn't it? Corvins had always prided themselves on their industrial efficiency. They'd built the largest mining operation in the galaxy by cutting costs and maximizing profits. How did they cut costs? By contracting everything to humans, who did the work better, faster, cheaper than anyone else. But the real humiliation came from the Andromedans. These beings had spent centuries boasting about their technological superiority, looking down on other species as intellectually inferior. Their representatives sat in the council chamber with expressions that would have been hilarious if the situation wasn't so desperate. Dr. Zara, the Andromedan Minister of Technology, had to make the most embarrassing admission of her career. "Our most advanced computers run on human-designed quantum processors that we... that we never fully understood." Let that sink in. The species that considered themselves the galaxy's premier technologists had been using human technology they couldn't even comprehend, let alone replicate. It was like discovering that your cutting-edge smartphone was actually powered by alien technology you'd never bothered to reverse engineer. The Andromedans had become technological parasites without even realizing it. They'd been so focused on feeling superior that they'd forgotten to actually become superior. But if economic collapse and technological failure weren't bad enough, the real nightmare was just beginning. Because here's what the Galactic Council had forgotten. Humans weren't just traders and engineers. They were peacekeepers. The first war broke out in the Sigma Draconis system. The hegemony of Castor and the Felinian Republic, ancient enemies, who had been kept in check by human mediation for over a century, started shooting at each other within hours of the human withdrawal. Old grudges, territorial disputes, resource conflicts that had been carefully managed by human diplomats suddenly erupted into full-scale warfare. General Tom Bradley, the last human military advisor in the galaxy, watched the chaos unfold from the council station. His weathered face showed no emotion as reports flooded in of civilian casualties in the Outer Rim, but his jaw clenched tighter with each transmission. "Casualty report from Epsilon Station," his aide announced. "Estimated 200,000 civilian deaths in the first bombardment." Tolman had spent 30 years of his life preventing exactly this kind of tragedy. He'd brokered peace treaties, established demilitarized zones, and created the protocols that had kept the galaxy stable for generations. Now he was watching it all burn, while politicians who'd never seen combat argued about blame and responsibility. Chancellor Vex approached him with what humans would recognize as desperation. "General Bradley, surely there's something we can do. Some way to convince your people to. This is what you wanted," Tom interrupted, his voice cutting through the chamber like a laser through steel. "You wanted to handle things your way? You voted down our peacekeeping proposals. You refused our requests for expanded patrol zones. You called our security concerns human paranoia." The general's eyes swept across the assembled delegates, taking in their alien features twisted with fear and confusion. "Well, congratulations. You're handling things your way now." The silence that followed was deafening. These beings who'd spent centuries debating and deliberating suddenly realized that some problems can't be solved with committee meetings and diplomatic protocols. Sometimes you need people who are willing to stand between civilization and chaos, even when it's dangerous, even when it's thankless, even when the people you're protecting don't appreciate what you're doing. The galaxy was learning the hard way that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of someone strong enough to maintain order, and they'd just sent their peacekeepers packing. As Tom watched another report of civilian casualties scroll across his screen, he knew the worst was yet to come. Because if the galaxy thought losing their technology and trade routes was bad, wait until they discovered what happened when you remove the moral compass from an entire civilization. The compound effect was accelerating, and there was no one left to stop it. Just like compound interest can turn small investments into massive wealth over time. The consequences of bad decisions compound, and the galaxy was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 6 months. That's how long it took for the galaxies. Arrogance to come back and bite them in ways they never imagined possible. 6 months for the most sophisticated civilization in the known universe to face an enemy they'd never encountered before. Complete economic collapse. Picture this. You're the CEO of a massive corporation. You've just fired your entire IT department because you thought they were overpaid and underappreciated. Everything seems fine for a few weeks, maybe even a few months. Then your servers crash, your communication systems fail. You realize that those overpaid technicians are actually the only thing standing between your company and total disaster. That's exactly what happened to the Galactic Council. Except, instead of a company, it was an entire civilization spanning thousands of worlds. The elegant web of interstellar commerce that had connected distant stars. Systems like a vast neural network was revealed to be utterly dependent on human infrastructure. Without their quantum communication networks, something as simple as sending a message from one star system to another took weeks instead of seconds. Business deals that used to be negotiated in real time across the galaxy now moved at the speed of ancient sailing ships. Chancellor Vex stood in his office on the council station, staring at a holographic display showing trade volume statistics. The numbers were falling faster than a meteorite through atmosphere. In just 6 months, galactic trade had dropped by 73%. Entire sectors of the economy were simply ... gone. How do we not see this coming? He muttered to his aide, a young Vesione named Kira, who'd only recently been promoted to replace 3 other staffers who'd resigned in panic. Sir, the humans tried to warn us, Kira replied carefully. The reports are all in the archives. They documented every system, every dependency, every potential failure point. We just didn't listen. 2 words that would haunt the galaxy for generations. But wait, it gets worse. Much worse. The translation matrices that had allowed different species to communicate for centuries were shutting down one by one. These weren't just simple language converters. They were sophisticated AI systems that understood cultural context, emotional nuance, and even species-specific humor. Without them, delegates who'd worked together for decades found themselves unable to hold basic conversations. Ever tried to negotiate a complex deal using Google Translate? Now imagine doing it with beings who communicate through color changes, sonic frequencies, and pheromone releases. The Galactic Council sessions became exercises in frustration as species who'd been allies for generations struggled to understand each other. The Felinian delegate would purr what he thought was a friendly greeting only to accidentally threaten to eat the Zessian representative's offspring. The Corvon Mining Consortium tried to renegotiate their contracts through interpretive dance. So with predictably disastrous results, it would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. But the real gut punch, the moment that made even the most stubborn alien leaders realize they'd made a catastrophic mistake, came from an unexpected source. The Xerith. Remember the Xerith, the reptilian species that had been granted permission to colonize Tau Ceti despite human warnings about the indigenous life forms. Well, their story was about to become the galaxy's most expensive lesson in the price of ignoring expert advice. Dr. Michael Foster, humanity's former chief xenobiologist, had spent 3 years studying Tau Ceti's ecosystem. His reports were comprehensive, detailed, and absolutely terrifying in their implications. The indigenous creatures weren't just sentient, they were the key to the planet's entire ecosystem. They produced a unique enzyme that filtered toxins from the atmosphere, maintained the planet's water cycle, and regulated the growth of other species. Remove them, Dr. Foster had warned the Council, and the entire biosphere will collapse within 18 months. The Xerath representatives had laughed. Human sentimentality, they'd called it. These creatures are primitive. They don't even have technology. The Galactic Council had sided with the Xerath. After all, they needed the resources that Tau Ceti offered. And what harm could there be in relocating a few thousand primitive aliens to make room for a productive colony? 18 months later, Commander Sock of the Xerath expedition was sending his final transmission from the surface of Tau Ceti. His voice was barely a whisper, interrupted by violent coughing fits as his respiratory system failed. The humans knew. He gasped into his communicator. They tried to save us all, and we called them fools. The indigenous species that humanity had tried to protect were gone, relocated to a reservation on a distant moon where they died within months. Without them, Tau Ceti's atmosphere was becoming poisonous. The air itself was turning toxic as industrial pollutants built up. Without the natural filtration system the natives had provided, the Xerath colonists started dying within days. 50,000 souls, scientists, engineers, families who'd come to build a new life, fall choking on air that had once been pure enough to breathe. We thought we were superior. Commander Salk's final words echoed across the galaxy. We thought we knew better than the humans. We were wrong about everything. The colony died within 2 weeks. 50,000 lives lost because the Council had ignored human wisdom, dismissed human warnings, chosen profit over preservation. But here's the thing that really haunts the survivors. It wasn't just about the Xerath. It was about what their deaths represented. Ambassador Alina Cross's words from that fateful day in the council chamber took on a new, terrifying meaning. We won't be complicit in genocide, even through inaction. The humans hadn't left because they were angry. They hadn't left because they were hurt or offended. They'd left because they'd seen the future where their warnings would be ignored, their expertise dismissed, and their moral compass rejected. They'd left because they refused to stand by and watch while the galaxy made one catastrophic mistake after another. Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you met someone with such strong principles that they'd walk away from power, wealth, and influence, rather than compromise their values? It's rare, isn't it? Most people cling to their positions, their status, their comfortable lives, even when they know they're part of something wrong. But humanity had done the impossible. They'd chosen integrity over influence, principles over profit, moral clarity over political convenience. And in doing so, it left the galaxy to face the consequences of its own arrogance. The compound effect was accelerating now, gaining momentum like a snowball rolling down a mountain. Failure created new failures. Each crisis spawned new crises. Each mistake compounded the damage from the last one. Chancellor Vex stood in his empty office, surrounded by reports of economic collapse, communication failures, and ecological disasters. The galaxy that had once seemed so stable, so sophisticated, so advanced, was falling apart at the seams. "What have we done?" he whispered to the empty room. But there was no one left to answer. The humans were gone, and with them had gone the galaxy's last hope of avoiding the catastrophe they'd created for themselves. The price of arrogance was becoming clear. It was higher than anyone had imagined possible. Just like compound interest can turn small investments into massive wealth over time, the galaxy was about to learn that the compound effect works both ways, and they were about to pay the ultimate price for their hubris. 1 year. 365 days of watching their civilization crumble. And the proud leaders of the Galactic Council finally did something that would have been absolutely unthinkable in their 1,000-year history. They swallowed their pride and decided to beg. Picture the most arrogant person you've ever met. Maybe that boss who never listened to advice, or that friend who always insisted they knew better than everyone else. Now imagine them showing up at your door, hat in hand, admitting they were wrong about everything. That's exactly what was about to happen on a galactic scale. Chancellor Vex stood in the council chambers, dressing what remained of Galactic Leadership. The great hall that had once hosted delegates from 67 species now echoed with the voices of barely 30 representatives. The rest, their governments had either collapsed, gone to war, or simply stopped participating in what they saw as a pointless exercise in denial. "We have no choice," Vex announced, his crystalline features dimmed with exhaustion. "We must formally apologize to humanity and request their return."
Oh.
The silence that followed was deafening. These beings had spent centuries believing they were the pinnacle of galactic civilization. They'd looked down on younger species, dismissed concerns from their allies, and treated even their most valuable partners as expendable. Now they were about to do something that went against every fiber of their being. Admit they were wrong. Ambassador Kettle of the Andromedon Republic, the species that had always prided themselves on their intellectual superiorities, stood up slowly. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "We're talking about groveling to a species we considered beneath us. Beneath us." Vex's laugh was bitter. "They were keeping us alive, and we were too arrogant to see it. But here's where it gets really interesting. The council didn't just decide to send a simple apology. They went all in. A delegation of the most senior ambassadors from every major species set course for Sol System, led by Chancellor Vex himself. They loaded their ships with offers of unprecedented concessions, trade benefits, and political power that would have made humanity the de facto rulers of the galaxy. Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you saw powerful people offer to give up their power to get someone back? It almost never happens, does it? Power is addictive, and most people will do anything to keep it. But desperation makes people do extraordinary things. The delegation brought with them something even more powerful than political offers: human emotion. They'd recorded messages from the survivors of every crisis caused by humanity's absence. The families of the Zareth colonists who died on Tau Ceti. The refugees from the Castor-Felinian War that had claimed millions of lives. The stranded traders who'd been rescued by alien ships but had lost everything when the human navigation networks failed. "Please," the composite message began, voices from dozens of species blending together in a chorus of desperation. "We understand. Now, we were wrong. We need you." The message played for 47 minutes, testimony after testimony of beings who'd lost everything because the galaxy had lost its moral compass. A Theshan mother whose children had died in the refugee camps. Corvan trader whose family had been stranded in deep space for months. A Felinian soldier who'd watched his unit get wiped out in a conflict that human peacekeepers could have prevented. It was heartbreaking. It was humbling. And it was about to become completely irrelevant. The delegation reached the edge of Sol System and sent their approach request. Standard diplomatic protocol. Identify yourself. State your business. Request permission to enter sovereign space. Simple, right? Then they waited and waited. And waited. Ever been ghosted by someone you really needed to talk to? Is that helpless? Feeling when your messages go unanswered, when you're not sure if they're ignoring you or if something's wrong? Now imagine that feeling multiplied by the weight of an entire civilization's survival. For 3 months, 93 days. Galaxy's most powerful representatives sat in their ships at the edge of human space, sending increasingly desperate messages into the void. They tried everything: formal diplomatic channels, emergency frequencies, even old personal communication codes from human friends they'd once known. Earth's defense grid acknowledged their presence with automated responses, but offered no communication. The human colonies throughout Sol System continued their activities as if the delegation didn't exist. Ships launched and landed. Mining operations continued. Orbital habitats spun lazily in the void, all completely ignoring the desperate aliens. Begging for attention at their doorstep, Chancellor Vex recorded message after message, each one more desperate than the last. "We know we failed you," he pleaded. "We know we took you for granted. But please, billions of lives are at stake. Our children are dying in wars we can't stop. Our economies are collapsing. We need your help." Silence. Ambassador Kettle tried a different approach, appealing to human compassion. We remember the humans who died protecting our worlds. Captain Sarah Chen, who sacrificed her ship to save a Thessian colony. Commander Jake Miller, who spent his life mediating our conflicts. They wouldn't want to see the galaxy burn. Still nothing. As the weeks turned into months, the delegation grew more desperate. They started broadcasting on open channels, hoping any human would listen. They sent care packages to human colonies, trying to demonstrate their goodwill. They even offered to turn over their own war criminals, beings who'd committed atrocities against human civilians, as a gesture of good faith. But the humans weren't just ignoring them. They were being deliberately, systematically excluded from human consciousness. It was like watching someone walk past a homeless person on the street, not with anger or hatred, but with complete and total indifference. Then, after 3 months of silence, a single transmission came from Earth. The delegation's communication officers scrambled to receive it, hope flickering in their hearts for the first time in months. It was Director Kate Morrison, now head of Human External Affairs. The same woman who delivered humanity's withdrawal order a year earlier. Her face appeared on the delegation's screens, and every alien representative leaned forward. Desperate for any sign of mercy or forgiveness, her message was brief and devastating in its simplicity. Your delegation is acknowledged. Your offers are rejected. Humanity has no further business with the Galactic Council. Leave our space within 24 hours or be destroyed. The silence that followed was different from the previous 3 months. This wasn't the silence of being ignored. This was the silence of absolute rejection. The humans hadn't just heard their pleas, they'd considered them carefully and decided they weren't worth responding to. Chancellor Vex felt something break inside him. Not his pride that had been shattered months ago. This was deeper. This was the realization that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Some trust, once broken, can never be restored. Sir, his aide whispered, what are your orders? Vex looked around at the other ships in the delegation, at the representatives of species that had once ruled the galaxy with absolute confidence. Now they were refugees, begging for scraps of attention from the people they'd cast aside. We leave, he said quietly. We leave, and we never come back. The delegation fled Sol System like beaten dogs, their ship's engines leaving trails of quantum distortion in their wake. Behind them, the human colonies continued their activities, completely unaffected by the galaxy's most humbling diplomatic failure. The compound effect had reached its inevitable conclusion. Every small act of ingratitude, every ignored warning, every dismissed concern had built up over time until it became an insurmountable wall of consequences. The galaxy had learned the hardest lesson of all. Some people, once you lose them, you can never get back. And as the delegation limped back to their dying civilization, they carried with them the knowledge that they'd just witnessed the most powerful demonstration of human strength they'd ever seen. The strength to walk away and never look back. The question now was, what do you do when you've lost the one thing that kept your world together? It's like compound interest can build wealth over time. The galaxy was about to discover that some losses compound to and. The bill was coming due. 2 years. 730 days since humanity had walked away from galactic civilization, and the universe had become a very different place. The surviving species had learned to function without their former protectors, barely like a man learning to walk, again after losing both legs. They'd adapted, formed new alliances, and developed workarounds for their missing technology. But they never forgot the lesson written in the empty space where human ships used to travel. The lesson was simple, brutal and undeniable. Some people are irreplaceable, and you only realize it after they're gone. Captain Marcus Reed stood on the bridge of the Liberty, now commanding the defense fleet around Earth. The same man who'd received that fateful Protocol Omega message 2 years ago was now watching the latest alien distress signal fade into static on his communications console. Another war, another crisis. Another desperate plea for help from beings who'd once dismissed human concerns as naive sentimentality. The irony wasn't lost on him. These were the same species that had voted down human peacekeeping proposals, ignored human warnings about ecological disasters, and treated human diplomats like bothersome children who didn't understand real politics. "Sir," Lieutenant Palmer asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd grown up hearing stories about humanity's glorious galactic past. "Shouldn't we at least consider no?" Marcus said firmly, cutting him off with the authority of a man who'd seen too much and forgiven too little. "We gave them 3 centuries of our best. They threw it away. Think about that for a moment. 300 years of human blood, sweat, and tears poured into building a better galaxy. 3 centuries of human lives sacrificed to keep the peace, maintain the trade routes, and mediate conflicts between species that couldn't even communicate without human translation matrices. And what did humanity get in return? Empty promises, broken treaties, and the cold shoulder when they needed help most. Through the viewports of the Liberty, Earth gleamed blue and beautiful, surrounded by the greatest space-based civilization. In galactic history, humanity had taken their withdrawal seriously, deadly seriously. They had built something magnificent in their isolation that made their former galactic partners look like children playing with toys. Orbital cities the size of small moons rotated slowly around Earth, their gleaming surfaces reflecting sunlight like jewels scattered across the void. Automated defense networks that could track and neutralize threats from light years away hummed with quiet efficiency. Manufacturing facilities that could produce more ships in a month than the entire Galactic Council had built in a decade churned out vessels of unprecedented sophistication. But here's what really set humanity apart: they'd learned from their mistakes. Every system they'd built was designed to be self-sufficient. Every technology was understood down to its fundamental principles. And every alliance was based on mutual respect rather than dependence. Captain Communications Officer Sarah Walsh called out, "We're receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council." Marcus sighed. They came weekly now, these desperate messages from beings who'd once acted like humanity. Should be grateful just to be included in their sophisticated civilization. This one was from Chancellor Vex himself. Now an old being broken by the weight of his species' mistakes, the holographic image flickered to life, showing a Theshan whose crystalline features had grown dull with age and despair. His voice cracked as he spoke, each word carrying the weight of a civilization in freefall. "The Andromedon Republic has fallen," the message began. "The Veshan colonies are under attack. The Outer Rim is in chaos. Billions are dying. Please, humanity, we're begging you. We know we don't deserve your help," but Marcus switched off the transmission without listening to the rest. He'd heard variations of this message. Dozens of times the Corvin Mining Consortium had collapsed when their human-designed equipment finally broke down beyond repair. The Felinian Republic and the hegemony of Castor had wiped each other out in a war that human peacekeepers could have prevented with a single diplomatic intervention. The Zereth were extinct, their entire species, a cautionary tale about the price of ignoring expert advice. Billions of innocent lives were lost because their leaders chose pride over wisdom, Marcus finished. How? Many human lives were lost because those same leaders chose politics over protection? How many human colonies were abandoned because helping us wasn't profitable enough? The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew the numbers. The Freedom Colony. Ship with 8,000 souls lost to pirates, while the Galactic Council debated whether human trade routes deserved protection. The Kepler 7 research station overrun by hostile aliens, while council members argued about jurisdiction. The Titan refugee crisis, where human resources were stretched to breaking point while their allies offered empty thoughts and prayers. Palmer nodded slowly. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. He understood the mathematics of betrayal. The compound interest of ingratitude that had built up over centuries until it became an insurmountable debt. "Set course for the Titan shipyards," Marcus ordered, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd made peace with difficult decisions. "We have new colonies to establish in the Andromeda Galaxy. The local species there might be more appreciative of our friendship." As the Liberty turned away from the galactic core, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest power is knowing when to walk away. They've discovered something that their former galactic partners never understood. True strength isn't about how much you can control, but about how much you can let go. The ship's engines hummed to life, preparing for the jump to hyperspace. Behind them, the galaxy they'd once called home continued its slow spiral into chaos. Wars raged across former trade routes. Entire species had gone extinct. Civilizations that had lasted millennia were crumbling in decades. But ahead of them lay something new, something better. Something built on the foundation of hard-earned wisdom rather than inherited arrogance. Captain Walsh called out, "We're receiving approach signals from the Andromeda Advance Team. They report successful first contact with 3 new species. All 3 have expressed interest in ... mutual cooperation." Marcus nodded. The Andromedons. Not the arrogant species from their former galaxy, but the inhabitants of the Andromeda. Galaxy had shown something their old galactic partners never had. Genuine curiosity about human knowledge, respect for human expertise, and appreciation for human values. "Inform the advance team that we're en route," Marcus ordered. And Walsh, "Make sure they understand that this time we're not just offering our services, we're offering partnership, real partnership, based on mutual respect and shared benefits." The Liberty jumped to hyperspace, leaving their former galaxy behind. Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had lost an empire, but they'd gained something far more valuable: self-respect, clear boundaries, and the knowledge that they'd never again allow themselves to be taken for granted. In the end, the galaxy discovered that they hadn't just lost their best allies, they'd lost their moral compass. And in the vast darkness of space, that was the most frightening loss of all. But humanity? Humanity had found something better than being needed by people who didn't value them. They'd found the courage to build something new with people who did. The compound effect works both ways. Just as bad decisions can compound into catastrophic consequences, good decisions can compound into extraordinary success. Humanity was about to discover just how powerful that compound effect could be when applied to building something. It's better rather than fixing something broken. The end.